Clearly.
I can hear you clearly. Thank you, Megan.
Perfect, perfect. So good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to this webinar. My name is Megan van der Bank, and I work in the marine program at SANBI. You would see in the chat I've invited you to introduce yourself as well. You can put your name and your organization into the chat so that we know who's in the room. Yeah, so as I said, a very warm welcome to the second installment of Reverse the Red webinars. Many of you would have been at the one held last week, Friday, which had a terrestrial focus. Yeah, we are, as many of you may know, the 7th of February was the Reverse the Red Day, but in fact, the whole of February, there are a series of initiatives that will continue globally in support of reversing the loss of biodiversity. As you may also know, our National Biodiversity Assessment was launched in December 2025. And that assessment, told us how well our species were doing. And unfortunately, a lot of them are on a declining trajectory. And we need more effort to support effective management as well as recovery. So this webinar today, that's why we're here today, we're really seeking through this webinar today to celebrate all of the conservation work that we're collectively doing in South Africa to try and reverse this trend of loss in particularly species. I'm hoping that through the session we can share some lessons, but we can also create awareness and let people know how they can get involved and how they can support species recovery efforts. All of our speakers today, we have quite a few. They will share some of their recovery stories, and some of them have been successful and some of them have had challenges. But those challenges are also good because that's how we learn, and we learn from each other. And those speakers span both freshwater and marine realms. So just again, a very warm welcome. And I'm going to get straight into the program and hand over to Davidine, who's going to tell us a bit about the NBA and how species and species recovery work feeds into global policy instruments, particularly in the context of Target 4 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. So Davidine, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Megan. So I'm just going to start. So thank you for that introduction. I think you've set the scene very nicely. Unfortunately, for those that attended last week, I'm just going to repeat what I said last week. So to give people some background that didn't attend last week. So as Megan said, this focus is on freshwater and marine species. We do not have many marine species. We have marine birds, but we hope to do a special session on marine species and their challenges in the weeks and months to come. Okay. So hopefully everybody knows what the NBA is. It's not a basketball game. It's the National Biodiversity Assessment of South Africa. This assessment is done across all of our realms. The assessment is done across all of our realms in South Africa, or the South African territories, and it includes the sub and Arctic territories as well. And you'll hear from projects and species that occur on those islands a little bit later. The focus today: freshwater, marine, and the sub and Arctic territories. The MBA is done at three different levels: ecosystem, species, and genes, and our focus species today. It's important to note that the National Biodiversity Assessment is a collective effort through collaboration with our partners, many institutions, and also some of these data sets have been built over many years. Sorry, just can people mute their mics? Thanks. And then also to note This is only a few institutions where their logos are presented here. If you have been a contributor or a participant in this MBA, if you're not noted here, you're definitely acknowledged on our MBA website. And again, if one of my SANBI colleagues can just pop the MBA website link into the chat so people can access it and explore the website, you'll be acknowledged on those particular pages or sections of work that you've contributed to. South Africa being a world leader in this National Biodiversity Assessment, as a result of that, in collaboration with our French French colleagues, I think Carol introduced them last week, so I didn't mention them to Megan, but we have a strong collaboration with the French. I don't know if there's anybody in the room that can give the name to me, but they've been supporting the work of developing and mapping biodiversity priorities, and this is freely available to anybody that is interested to learn more. And then from the South African work that we've done, there's also been a course that's been developed to equip other countries to also repeat this assessment. So now we're focusing back on our species, and in the next slide, I'll talk about the South African National Species Expert Group as major contributors to our assessments and the indicator work that we do. Our provincial agencies, their role is very important. Apart from participating in assessments, they are also the people that are on the ground having to deal with conservation issues and also having to plan where these initiatives should take place. Our NGOs is our partners in implementing findings and also conducting some of these assessments. So they are quite critical in conservation efforts in South Africa. Ordinary South Africans are volunteers. Last week we heard about the custodians of rare and endangered wildflowers. We heard about the LEPSOC, so Lepidopteran volunteers that monitor butterflies, and there's quite a wide range of other citizen science projects where ordinary people are collecting data on the ground that informs our assessments, and we're able to have the most accurate assessments based on what's happening in the field. Our South African Species Specialist Group was officially established in the last 2 years. However, this group been working with SANBI for more than 50 years. My colleague Domitilla Raimondo has been leading this work with the various different taxon leads and taxon experts. And I'd just like to emphasize that this group is not just the taxon experts, but they also include the provincial agencies and other experts that are able to provide data to us to make and to conduct assessments. Focusing now on the latest NBA results. So in the next few months, there'll be more detailed presentations on the NBA findings. I'm only focusing on the one element of species, their status and their trends. In the previous NBA, we assessed 12 taxonomic groups, and in the current one, we've expanded to 16 groups. We've included new groups that we've included is the Anastraca, our fairy shrimps, freshwater crabs, spiders, and we've included for the first time beach invertebrates classified as coastal invertebrates, and this was also the first time these species were assessed globally. The inclusion of these invertebrates was as a result of a finding in the 2018 NBA, where this was highlighted as a major gap for the assessment, where we didn't have enough representation of invertebrates within our assessment. To find out more about all of these taxonomic groups and their findings, so their status, their trends, their protection level, active recovery projects, you can read all about them on the NBA website, and each taxonomic group has their own page. We've also summarized these findings at the realm level, so for our marine, freshwater, as well as terrestrial. Some of these pages are still being produced, so I think we still need to populate 4, but the majority of the taxonomic groups are available for you to access. The graph over here is the red list index, and this is a global standard that we use to monitor trends over time with regards to the red list of threatened species. And if it's so just to orientate you, these are all the taxonomic groups that we've assessed, and each point here indicates an assessment date. New assessments in this MBA was for birds, a sample of our plants, freshwater crabs, the anostroca that we've included, and reptiles had a 2023 assessment, and then for sharks as well. And sparrows has also been updated. One indicates that all species are assessed as least concern, meaning that there's not any threat of extinction for that group. And then if you go further towards zero, or if you're on zero, it means all species in that group is extinct. So I'd like to draw your attention to these two groups at the bottom. This was a major finding in the 2018 assessment, where we had freshwater fish coming out as the lowest on this index. And with a new assessment, we've included our sharks and also included national assessments where we're only looking at the state of these species within South Africa, and they coming out as the most threatened group in South Africa. So as part of the MBA, we bring together key messages, and one of those key messages related to species is that we are continuing on this negative trend, so species becoming more threatened, particularly freshwater birds. When you look at the overall group, so this is the average for South Africa, and birds, if you look at the overall bird group, it's above the average for South Africa, but it has a negative trend, and species contributing to this negative trend. Sorry, somebody's mic is on. For this negative trend is largely related to the state and the decline of freshwater birds in South Africa. Then the other groups where we've pulled out the major drivers was for mammals, plants, and reptiles. So main drivers for them: climate change, the loss of habitat towards mining, and renewable energies. These three graphs here for today's purposes, we have freshwater species, so it covers many of our animal groups, specifically freshwater fishes. The impacts are for species that have changed in status. We haven't had a new assessment for fishes, so it's still the same data we had in 2018. This group will be updated in the next 2 years. But the impacts that we've identified then is still prevalent for this group, especially if you look at the trends that we're observing for our freshwater ecosystems. This map is for our marine species, and it's just looking at the species that have had a change or an increase in threat status where they are where they occur. But we do note that we need further work on this to understand these patterns as well. So as Megan mentioned earlier, we need to report to our global commitments, and target 4 of the global biodiversity framework is what this links to, and the target there is to halt species extinction. And this is also a key finding in the 2025 National Biodiversity Assessment, where we note this decline, we note this this negative trend, and we need efforts to recover these species and to curb extinctions, especially with the growing number of threatened species. So what have we been doing? As the National Species Expert Group, we've gone to our experts in the last 2 years, and in response to this target, we've asked them, what are those species that are in need of urgent recovery, and also look at how much it will cost South Africa to be able to recover these species. And they based their estimates on previous experience, and they've also identified those species that, as experts working with these groups, they think are these species in need of recovery. As you can see, we haven't done it for all taxonomic groups. Currently, we're busy engaging with the IUCN, who is doing this same process at a global level, and our experts are now reviewing the list of priorities sent by the IUCN to cross-check whether what they identifying is matching what our experts have, and it's coming out very similar. So we're busy finalizing these lists, and also training to do green list assessments. So this is the opposite of the red list. It's tracking how well recovery is doing and whether it's reversing the red on our species. So I won't keep you any longer. I'd like to hand over to our next speakers, where they'll be telling you about the work that has happened in South Africa, so even predating this target, and also taking those efforts forward for South Africa to meet target 4 in the next few years. Thank you.
Thanks, Davidine, for that short overview of a massive body of work. So well done on getting that into the time allocation. In the interest of time, I'm going to go directly to the next speaker. I want to encourage you, if you have questions, to perhaps put them in the chat, and we can see whether some of them could be answered throughout the webinar, in case we have limited time at the end. So next up we have Jean Tarrant. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. She's from Anura, Africa, and she'll be giving us an overview of amphibian recovery work in South Africa with Picker's gull reed frog as a case study. Thanks, Jean.
Thank you, Megan, and thanks, Davidine, for setting the scene. I hope you can all hear me. I'm Jean Tarrant with Anura Africa, and also the regional chair for the Amphibian Specialist Group for Southern Africa. I've renamed my presentation slightly to SONA, the State of the Nation's Amphibians, and I'm just going to be giving first a bit of a global overview of amphibian recovery and needs, zooming down to South Africa, and then, as Megan mentioned, focusing on Picker's gill reed frog, which is a species in South Africa that's had a lot of work done on it over the last 15 years or so. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, but I'm sure you're all pretty aware of the red list, and according to the red list, globally, currently 41% of amphibian species are considered threatened, so critically endangered, or vulnerable categories. And this really is a very high proportion of this entire class of animals. And if we include the data deficient and near threatened species, we're looking at pretty much half of the 9,000 currently described species.
Sorry, Jean, sorry to interject. Your presentation is not yet in presentation mode and hasn't been advancing. So could you just put it in presentation mode for us? Thank you.
Thank you about that. Let me just try sharing again. Can you see now the current slide?
I see the PowerPoint, but it's not in presentation mode. Are you working on 2 screens or?
No, just one screen, which is tricky.
I wonder, while Jean is busy getting her slides ready, I wonder if there's a burning question on Davidine's presentation. I think we can take one question while we're waiting for Jean. It doesn't seem like there's a question for you, Davidine.
I'm struggling to navigate between putting it on presentation mode, which I'm doing on my end, but then that's not coming through.
Do you want to share your screen and have it in? Okay, let's see now. Just click to the next. Okay, I can see your second slide now. Just click to the third slide.
Is that coming through?
No,
Map
it's
of the
still on
world.
It's still on the second slide.
Sorry, guys.
Are you sharing? Can I ask, are you sharing your, well, you
Sharing
only have
window.
one, you only have the one screen. Try sharing the screen and not the window.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Not yet. Let's just give it a moment.
Hi, Megan.
Yeah.
I've just forwarded Jean's presentation, so maybe if you can share it, thanks.
Did you send it to me?
Yes, I just sent it now.
And just give me a moment. Why don't you share it from your side, Evelyn, if you have it already?
Sorry, I also have
Sorry.
one screen and I'm struggling with the
Okay, yes,
connection. Yeah.
yes, it. I have it now. Sorry for that inconvenience, everyone.
Thanks, Megan. If you could skip
I'll put it.
straight to the third slide.
Just give me a moment. There we go. Third slide. There we go.
Thank you. All right, thanks so much. All right, so just to give you a global overview, the Amphibian Survival Alliance is a network of partners across the globe working on amphibian conservation and research projects. That gives you an idea of where they're distributed. And this has been a recently updated website, so nice timing for this presentation. You can see that there are about 89 partners currently in the alliance. But this, in a way, demonstrates really the severe lack of capacity for amphibians. As I mentioned, there's 9,000 species, so this is, roughly 100 species per active organization. But a lot is being done, and there's active projects globally on around 275 species, and the network has grown by 25% just this year. Next slide, please. So this effort in mapping has been a collaborative effort between the ASA and Synchronicity Earth and Rewild, just to look at all these partners and in relation to what we call the threatened amphibian landscape. So areas of very high diversity of species, but also high threat level, which are the shaded areas on the map. And you can advance to next slide. If we zoom into Africa, these areas are concentrated around the tropics and Madagascar, which has a huge endemicity of species. No threatened amphibian landscapes in South Africa, where we have 135 species. And we can go to the next slide. And these are the partners currently. And so I think maybe my call to action here is if there are any other partners in the room who are interested in amphibian projects. These are, of course, partners that belong already to the ASA network. So there are probably many others that are working on amphibians in South Africa. But just a shout out to organizations that potentially want to work on amphibians but don't have frog projects necessarily. Thank you. All right, so Dividine's done a good background on the NBA and where things are with that. The amphibians were also one of the groups that were recently updated. We are just about finished with these updates for the Southern African region, so 10 countries including South Africa. Around 250 species have been assessed, 135 for South Africa. 22% of South Africa's frog species are threatened. And if we look at our endemic species, this translates to half of all of our endemic species, including near threatened and data deficient, as being threatened. And of these, 79% are considered to be underprotected through the work we've looked at with the NBA. And the main pressures for amphibians are those emanating from the effects of invasive species. So a lot of habitats being degraded through alien invasive plants in particular, and this is affecting 76% of our threatened species. A big driver, of course, is habitat loss and transformation, and this, of course, relating to the state of our freshwater systems. Since the last assessments done about 10 years ago, 30 species have had a change in their status. Only 2 of these were genuine, a lot of non-genuine changes, but some of these non-genuine changes still reflect efforts in activities and research on these species. Thank you. All right, so just a quick snapshot also included on the NBA website. Please go and have a look at the amphibian page. There are currently 12 threatened species that have focal projects on them, conducted by several organizations listed here. And of course, there's a lot of research projects also being undertaken in addition by several universities. So today's focus is going to be on Pickersgill's reed frog. So we can skip to the next slide and then the next one. Thank you, Megan. So as mentioned, this species has really had a big focus in the last 15 years, around about 2008. Not a lot was known about it. It was known from 10 sites then. And through really concentrated survey efforts and research, a lot has been done in terms of understanding its distribution, which contributed to a downlisting in status from critically endangered in 2010 to endangered in 2016 and 2018 assessments, and then reassessed again now recently as endangered. So this species is very much restricted to the KZN coastline, where there are very high impacts from development, mining, housing, you name it. And this is why the species was selected for a biodiversity management plan, which has been developed in partnership with KZN Wildlife. And that process took quite a few years until it was gazetted in 2017, and has subsequently, and in parallel to the process being implemented, and really a big focus on partnership development, improved research and monitoring, improving policy and legislation. 127 hectares of Pickersgill reed frog habitat has been formally protected through work done by the Endangered Wildlife Trust. And really all of this work has led to a massive increase in public awareness about the species. And there's been a lot of media outputs related to work on the species. Most recently, Adrian from KZN Wildlife, Adrian Armstrong, has also confirmed a range extension to the south of the distribution of the species. Thank you. So just looking at the biodiversity management plan and how effective the first iteration, the first 5 years has been, and I strongly encourage you to have a look at this paper, which was recently published looking at this. Just to briefly summarize here. So currently, this is the only biodiversity management plan for a threatened frog species in South Africa. As I mentioned, it was gazetted in 2017, and we're now working on the revision of this for the next iteration. During those 5 years, the number of member partners increased from 17 to 24 organizations. As I mentioned, the number of sites for the species increased dramatically. So already up until 2017, from around 2008, there was a big jump already. And then within the BMP period, this has jumped from 30 localities to 46. Currently, we're probably sitting on about 60 known sites where the species occurs. So that kind of information is still being generated. From this and working with Ezemvelo, we've done a site prioritization, looking at all kinds of different factors, prioritization for where conservation efforts are needed. There's been a big improvement, as I mentioned, in habitat protection and with that habitat management. And data on the species has been included into municipal and national planning processes. There's been several research outputs, publications. The one above is in addition to this, and there's been several postgraduate studies focused on the species. There's this focus has really brought in a lot of funding for the species, and both through organizations directly employing people and then through a lot of alien clearing work on the species. During that period, 150 people at least were employed as a result of this tiny little species. Thank you, Megan. Yeah, and really the point of that paper and the point of this example is that collaboration between partners is absolutely essential. We wouldn't have been able to do what we have done for the species if there weren't willing partners working together and consistently. And of course, acknowledgement to those partners and funders over the last 10 years. So the next step, so for Pickersgill Reed Frog in particular, as I mentioned, we're revising the biodiversity management plan. We've done an exercise to identify opportunities and challenges and threats that need to be considered going forward. There's ongoing research and surveys, including through a PhD study with Cardiff University, which is building on the genetic research on the species, and also using environmental DNA to look at community assemblages and really understand what's happening in the habitat of the species, and also looking at improved translocation planning. This was one of the only species that at ex situ captive breeding programs been run, and we really need to now move to the next stage of that in terms of reintroducing and making sure that introduced individuals can successfully colonize new sites. And then more broadly speaking, for South Africa's threatened amphibians and the ones that are needing recovery, so working with SANBI in identifying species for the green status listing, and these target 4 species requiring recovery. As part of this and off the back of the red list assessments, we're developing the next 10-year strategy for conservation and research, building stronger capacity, and as Davidine mentioned, really looking at those funding shortfalls. Amphibians are severely underfunded. Davidine mentioned a 4-fold need increase in funding. It's probably more than that. So thanks very much, Megan.
Thanks so much, John, and sorry that you had to kind of rush there in the end. We are running behind schedule, and I want to encourage everyone, if you have any questions for John, please pop them in the chat. I see that Tanya has a question there already. We're going to move on now to Roger Bowles, who works at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, and he's going to tell us all about the conservation of orange-fringed largemouth and recovery efforts in that context. Roger, take it away.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. We're just trying to share screen. Can you see it?
I can. It's not in presentation mode yet.
Yeah, it's not true.
Roger, if you sorted, I also have a copy, or Zimkita has a copy. So just in case we need to switch.
All right.
Samkito, would you be ready to share?
Zim, if you could share, that would be fantastic. Is it coming?
All right, can you see it now?
Yeah, perfect.
Reaching.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks very much for inviting me to talk. So this is just a case study. I'm not doing a synopsis of all freshwater fishes. We have been working on the conservation of the orange-fringed largemouth or orange-fringed river bream, Chaetia brevis, which is in Mpumalanga and Eswatini for about the last 5 years. This is an endemic haplochromine cichlid. It's endemic it's got a restricted range. It occurs in the Lamati River system in Eswatini and in Mpumalanga, South Africa. And then there were also recorded records from coastal lakes just north of Maputo around the mouth of the Nkomati. So the project started, my son was a nature conservation student at the University of Mpumalanga. And the reason we started this project was really to teach him how to do survey work and teach him about the IUCN red listing. And we were going to go through and do a reassessment. And I thought that was going to be a relatively simple, straightforward project. And after 2 years of surveys, we actually hadn't found any fish within the river system in South Africa. We'd found a few stragglers in what was the Driekoppies Dam, which is right on the Eswatini border. And we'd also been into Mozambique, to the coastal lakes, where we had collected Chaetia there. And we'd run the genetics of the Mozambique population, and they've come out as a new species. So at that point, we really were rather worried. I applied for funding from the Mohammed bin Zayed Conservation Fund at this point. This was in 2024. And I was successful in getting funding, quite a lot of funding, to do a whole range of activities. So really the project that we're running right now has come out of that and is the Mohammed bin Zayed Fund project. It comprises a bunch of activities. First of all, we plan to complete all the distribution surveys. Essentially, at that point, it was just Eswatini that we needed to sample. We needed to know whether it was up in the upper river and how far it went up, whether it went up into tributary systems or not. And then we were going to do an IUCN Red List reassessment. We also planned to do captive breeding work. And then the main part of the project was to do a series of conservation stockings. We know from the 1970s that Chaetia had been stocked into 3 dams in Kruger National Park, and that one of those has been successful. So it does exist outside of its natural range in Kruger National Park. And there was quite good documentation about its recovery, its establishment in that. So we knew dams were a good option. We can't put the fish back into the river because of a variety of threats, which I'll elaborate on later. And then the final aspect of the project was to look at the biology of the animal. We know almost nothing about its biology. We don't know how fast it grows, how many times it breeds, how often it breeds, the numbers of eggs it produces, and we need that data for proper conservation planning. So early 2025, we completed the final surveys in Eswatini. We used a variety of methods, mostly netting and some minnow traps. These are all very effective. The species typically occurs in sort of deeper parts of the river. They don't seem to go into tributary streams or into shallow riffles. So these methods are the most efficient. We did complete that. And we found that it's basically confined to a 2.5 kilometer stretch of river. It's down from it originally occurred. You can see the red line. That is the bottom end of the system is where it's in confluence with the Komati system. It doesn't go into the Komati system, we think, because of tigerfish. And then it goes up to around the Popanyani, a tributary system called the Popanyani confluence. in the sort of the middle felt in Eswatini. So it seems to have gone from basically Driekoppie's dam and then all the way down the river, and then the upper reaches of the river has also gone for some reason. So there were no viable populations in South Africa, and the coastal Mozambique populations were considered to be a new species, different species. So as far as the threats were concerned, the lower reaches of the river have been, the Driekoppie's dam has been stocked with largemouth bass, and they've essentially wiped out a number of species from both the dam and the lower river. And they've also progressed up the river to this gauging weir. This is a water gauging weir just across the Eswatini border at a place called Matsamo. And bass go right up to this wall. Like this last few days, we found bass at the wall trying to jump over this weir. Luckily, they're not very good jumpers, so they haven't progressed further up. And then in the upper reaches, unfortunately, there's a very large gold mine, and it's increasing in its size and operations. And it is right on the banks of the river. This is the Lamati River in the foreground, and it's about 10 meters away from this. This is what they call a leach pad. All of that material in front is essentially smashed up gold ore. And I don't know whether you can see, but right on top of the pile, there are a whole bunch of sprayers, and they're spraying cyanide onto the leach pad. And it percolates down through the ore and extracts gold, and then they suck the fluid out at the bottom. And the problem is if it leaks, and they do, and this dam has leaked, and there's been a massive fish kill at one point, then cyanide is going to kill an awful lot of fish and invertebrates. We reckon that we've lost about 20 kilometers river in the upper reaches due to fish kills from the Lamati gold mine. So based on all of that, we have reassessed it recently with the IUCN red listing criteria, and we've assessed it as critically endangered. So it's gone up from endangered to critically endangered based on essentially now one single population, a huge reduction, 90% reduction in the area of occupancy, and continuing threats to the species. So the captive breeding program, we've set up several captive breeding programs. Mine is probably the most successful in Grahamstown. I've got three 2-meter long fish tanks, and I've bred over 2,000 of these guys. We've stocked out 1,558 fish into dams so far of bred fish. We've got breeding programs in Marble Hall as well. We've recently, late last year, we set up the Malkerns Fisheries Department dams with Ketia, and we're delivering today. Later on, we'll be delivering some fish to Pretoria Zoo. So, and we're hoping also that Two Oceans are going to take some later in the year. So we are expanding these operations. If you get it right, they're not that difficult to breed, but they are a little bit aggressive. So males do kill females if they don't behave properly. And so sizes of broods ranging, depending on the adult size of the female adult size, ranging from 25 up to 156. They mouth brood. You can see this female on the left. She's actually got eggs, or probably babies, in her mouth, which she broods for about 2 weeks. And then we remove the females because she will eat her babies if she's left with them.
Roger,
yes.
Sorry to interject. I just wanted to check how many slides you still have left. You have 1 minute to just.
Okay, I'll speed up. All right.
Thanks so much.
So this is it's either the conservation stockings. This is the first dam we stocked. This is a farm called Laughing Waters. We stocked this with about, I think, 160 fish. And this has been one of our successful dams. We've got dams all over the region. This is a major farming area. We've stocked 27 dams so far in 37 events, and we've stocked a total of 3,500 fish. At the moment, we estimate 11 of these have been successful for a variety of reasons. I'm going to skip that one then, as we're running out of time. The biological study, this has now progressed into a master's study, and it's going to be finishing in 2027. It's looking at fecundity. You can see a gonad on the left. So this is clearly showing two size groups of eggs. So it's definitely, they're repetitive spawners, which is good news, because they have multiple options then if broods fail. On the right-hand side, that's an otolith, one of the ear bones, and we age our fish looking at growth rings in the otoliths. This was a 3.5-year-old one on the right, but we estimate they're getting up to about 5 years old. In terms of continuing the program, we're hoping to continue with conservation stockings towards the end of 2026, and monitoring of these dams is going to continue into 2027. Master studies are going to carry on into 2027, and we're hoping to get going next month an education program with local schools, with a company, and we are also hoping to get going a genetic study which will be looking at diversity within the dam populations, comparing those with wild populations, and that would hopefully inform our stocking program in a better way. In terms of who's helped, SIAB obviously supports me. Mohammed bin Zayed Conservation Fund have provided all the money for this, and they've been tremendous. Mpumalanga Parks Board and Eswatini Fisheries have permitted everything, and they've been involved in aspects of the surveys. And then the farmers in the local area, particularly in South Africa, have been tremendous. They've provided a range of logistical help, as well as providing dams for stockings. Cobwa has given us water flow data, and Gordon O'Brien, University of Mpumalanga, funded our early 2021 survey work. Sorry, I ran over time.
Thanks so much, Roger, for sharing that rich work with us. And it looks like it's logistically complex work, so well done on pulling this all off. I'm going to swiftly move on to our next speaker. We are running out of time, and I know some of you would need to leave at 2 o'clock sharp. I think we're going to run a bit over time, hopefully not significantly, so please bear with us. I'm going to invite Cecilia Cirilla to load her presentation. She's from Freshwater Research Center, and she's going to tell us all about their efforts to save sandfish. Thanks, Cecilia.
Thanks, Megan. Can you confirm whether I'm sharing the presentation in presentation mode?
You are.
Okay, wonderful. Hi, everybody. My name is Cecilia. I'm a researcher at the Freshwater Research Center in Kommetjie in Cape Town. And yeah, today I'm excited to share a case study of active recovery work, not too dissimilar from Roger's work, some of the similar threats, but this one focusing on the Western Cape, Western and Northern Capes on the Clan William sandfish, which is South Africa's most threatened migratory freshwater fish. So for those of you who don't know the sandfish, it is a large freshwater fish found in the Cederberg mountain region of southwestern South Africa. It's found in only one river system in the west, mostly in the Western Cape, but it does go a bit into the Northern Cape. They're migratory fish moving from large main stem rivers and into smaller tributaries to spawn in spring. They are endemic to the Olifantsdoring River system, which is a highly seasonal river network. Each year when the floods arrive, adult fish migrate upstream into tributaries like the Bido River to spawn. And this is just an insert showing where the Bido is. Their entire life cycle depends on the seasonal flood pulses, so that when the river flows, they move, they migrate, but when it doesn't, they can't. Historically, adult sandfish would migrate from the main stem and into the tributaries to lay eggs. You're just seeing an example of their life cycle. And then young sandfish hatching in these tributaries would grow there before moving back into the main rivers when the winter rains returned, and then the cycle would continue. But over the past century, the sandfish population across the ODRS has declined massively. In the Olifants River, large dams that were built over 100 or close to 100 years ago have cut off the species spawning migrations. And on top of this, black bass, 3 different species that were introduced from North America in the 1930s, they have preyed heavily on indigenous fishes, including sandfish, their juveniles. And so by the 1980s, sandfish had completely disappeared from the Olifants. And today they can be found only in the During River and its tributaries. Here in the During, the species is also in trouble. Surveys of the During River over the past 2 decades have led to concerning finding that although we do tend to catch decent numbers of large sandfish, those juvenile and subadult size classes are conspicuously missing. So instead of seeing something like this, we're seeing only the adults and the really large adults, with very few subadults coming in our catches, despite a variety of capture methods in the middle of the large pools and also on the banks. But we do know that sandfish continue to spawn in some tributaries. So what's going on here? And to no one's real surprise, it's non-native fish and lack of water. So since the introduction of predatory bass and bluegill, most juvenile sandfish are being eaten in the tributaries before they can mature and return to spawn. And then those that do survive, the alien fish, end up stranded in rivers that dry out by the end of summer. So this dewatering is driven by water abstraction for agriculture and thirsty alien trees that suck up water from those rivers. And with these threats at play, the During population has been in decline for a while, not because adults weren't spawning, but because the next generation wasn't surviving. So we asked a simple question: if juveniles are dying in the river, what if we raise them somewhere safe first? And that's where the Saving Sandfish program comes in. We rely on a management strategy called head starting, in which a vulnerable early life stage of a species they're reared in captivity until they're big enough to survive better in the wild. So instead of releasing tiny juveniles into predator-filled waters where there's bass, we grow them past that vulnerable stage when they're too large for bass to eat, and then we release them into the wild. So it is very much a population augmentation program, an emergency program to prevent extinction, since there is very, very little recruitment. The project begins with rescuing thousands of juvenile sandfish from the wild before the Beto dries up completely each summer. And the annual rescue effort is a big collaboration with dozens and dozens of other humans. Each year, we enlist the help of master's students, high school groups, and local community members to help us carry out these rescues. And we've now been working with the same community members for the past 5 years. So we've built a really lovely relationship with them. And then after this, the rescued fish are transported to off-stream farm reservoirs where they are reared without our assistance for several months. Here they grow in a protected environment, free from invasive predators. And I just want to pause here to say that before a reservoir can be used as a sandfish sanctuary, it has to be cleared of invasive fish. In this case, bass and carp in the various dams. We remove them, we either drain the dams or use rotenone to make the reservoirs safe for sandfish, but the creation of these dams has a broader benefit. One, it eliminates potential sources of invasive fish that could spill into the river during floods. And an equally important outcome has been the partnerships we've built with local landowners. So farmers have volunteered their reservoirs for conservation use, and it's fostered a stronger conservation ethic in the valley. Here is Barry, owner of one of the dams, Mertenhof Dam, helping release sandfish reared in his dam back into the wild. So finally, we release the fish back into the wild, and we use pit tags in order to be able to gauge survival in the future. So after we release them, we have to wait a full year before those particular fish can return. And we take advantage of the fact that these are migratory fish. We know that at least some of them are going to be coming back up the Beto to spawn in following years. So we've placed an antenna array at the mouth of the Beto. And so any fish that has a pit tag that swims over that antenna has their identity recorded. And then we can see how many of those fish are coming back year after year. So in these past 5 years, we've rescued over 42,000 juvenile sandfish. We've also released just under 6,000 fish back into the wild. Most of these are tagged with pit tags. And this is just an example of what a release might look like. It really is the culmination of our hard work. And it's exciting to to be able to see how much they've grown since we rescued them at about 3 to 6 centimeters. But did this project ultimately work? So they have to be able to survive in the wild and come back to spawn. So before we could answer that question, we had to establish a baseline. And in 2021, before our large-scale releases began, only 180 wild sandfish migrated upstream in our study system in the Bido to spawn. And by 2024, we'd recorded 467 head-started tagged fish entering the Bido River. That means the migration more than tripled in size compared to the baseline year. And for a species on the brink, that's pretty significant. It shows that our intervention can rapidly boost recruitment to a wild population. However, this wouldn't be a conservation story without some setbacks. This past migration season in 2025, we recorded only 23 tagged fish, which is a big difference from almost 500. So to understand this, it helps to look at the first season of pit tag data back in 2022. And this graph shows the timing of the spawning migration. So each bar represents a number of unique tagged fish detected for the first time on that date. So basically new arrivals per day. And you can see that there are these two distinct waves, and you might wonder why. If you know these fish or fish similar to sandfish, you might guess that it has something to do with flow. So we have a flow logger placed close to the antenna, and if we overlay that data, we can see that their migration waves or pulses, they track closely with these pulses and flow. So we now know that sandfish are using these floods to cue their spawning migrations. So once we know this, it's not a huge surprise that we only got 23 fish coming up in 2025. As many of you are probably aware, the Western Cape is experiencing early drought conditions, and there's a drought caution throughout the province. And so although this result was disappointing, it was extremely illuminating because it reinforced what we already suspected, that sandfish migrations are linked to high flow events. And it highlights how important it is that we work to increase flows for people and sandfish. And
I just want to double check how many slides you still have left. You have about 1 minute.
This is my last slide. Thanks.
Okay.
So what's next for the Saving Sandfish project? You likely realize, well, that this Head Start approach is likely boosting the size of the sandfish population in the wild. It doesn't present a long-term solution to the root problems, which are non-native fish and declining flows. So this last year, we started the Bido River Restoration Project. We know that it's a key spawning tributary, and if we're able to restore this river so that it's once again a source of sandfish recruits rather than a population sink, the species may well be on its way to true recovery. So early last year, we carried out a chemical eradication of invasive bass and bluegill in the upper 9 kilometers of the Bido River, increasing the habitat available to 5 species of indigenous fish by a factor of 10. And what we've seen is that the indigenous fish have already started recolonizing the treated reach, but we will continue to monitor the river to see whether all invasive fish are truly gone. So we've also begun the removal of thousands of thirsty alien trees, buying back flows for people and aquatic life of the Bido River. And if this works, 30% of the river will now act as a refuge for these 5 species, highlighting how orienting conservation action around one flagship species like a sandfish can have knock-on benefits for associated species. And on the horizon is the extension of this refuge to the entire 30 kilometers of the Bido River, so that sandfish born in the Bido are able to survive and recruit without our intervention. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. I'm jealous. It's so beautiful, these environments. And I love the fact that you involve local communities and landowners in these recovery efforts to try and foster local custodianship.
Yeah, it's key.
Amazing, amazing. I'm going to quickly move on to our next speaker. Alistair, if you could load your presentation. He's going to speak to us about seabird recovery.
Thanks, Megan.
If you have any questions for Cyrilla, please pop them in the chat.
Sorry, can you see slide mode?
I can indeed. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Oops, let me get to the right slide. Thanks, Megan. Yeah, so I'm just going to talk about recovery efforts for threatened seabirds in South Africa's exclusive economic zone, Just want to acknowledge some of the co-authors who project leads on many of these projects: Anton Wolfhard, Robin Adams, Andrea Angel, and Christina Hagen. So we're going to showcase 3 examples of projects that are linked to threats that are responsible for the decline in populations of seabird species. So the biggest threats facing seabirds at the moment in South Africa's EEZ actually reflect global threats to seabirds as well. So bycatch, incidental bycatch in fisheries, resource competition, responsible for almost about 24 species, threatened species in South Africa, and then invasive alien mice on Marion Island is a really large threat in that location. So I'm just going to go through 3 recovery effort projects aligned to those 3 threats: bycatch, resource competition, and invasive mice on Marion. So starting with Marion. This is a project led by Anton Wolfhard and colleagues. It's a partnership between BirdLife South Africa and the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. It's around the urgent action needed to eradicate mice on this island, which have been there for many, many years. But the impacts have increased over the last couple of decades. They have decimated the insect populations in the islands, and now they're turning to birds, firstly eggs and chicks, and now even adult albatrosses being eaten live on the nests. So without intervention, house mice are likely to cause the local extinction of most of these species breeding on the island within the next 30 to 50 years. So this project is currently in the planning phase. There's a lot of funds that have to be raised for the operational phase, which includes at least 6 helicopters, lots of bait, and lots of expertise in these operations. At the moment, it's unlikely that this implementation will happen before 2029, but the funding efforts are moving along quite promisingly. So we're hoping that date is on the cards. The benefits of this intervention have been showcased at other islands around the world, but there has been 2 recent failures on Gough Island and another subtropical island, which is cause for concern, and hence the delay in this project to facilitate bait trials on the island, which have been conducted over the last couple of years. So small and large bait trials to basically update the feasibility of this project. It's a very, very large island to eradicate all the mice on. So the team are just making sure that they hedge their bets before the operations actually happen. Moving on to incidental bycatch in fisheries. So this threat is generally also with the large sort of pelagic species like albatrosses and petrels that are the most vulnerable to this. Historically, it was a huge threat in our waters, killing tens of thousands of seabirds every year. Luckily, there has been effective mitigation measures that have been implemented, quite notably the implementation of bird scaring lines, which scare birds away from the impact zones for these fisheries. And then just last year, the department, in collaboration with BirdLife, developed a national plan of action for the next 5 years. And this document spells out very clearly what needs to be done to mitigate incidental bycatch with fisheries over the next years, in terms of monitoring the populations and the impacts of these fisheries on the birds, and also guidelines and actions to minimize and mitigate negative impacts, and also outreach and awareness. So just to showcase one of the projects that's currently being rolled out by the BirdLife South Africa's Albatross Task Force is this monitoring compliance device. Given that there's a low level of observer coverage on these vessels, typically less than 10%, and these are the offshore hake vessels. It's hoped that this device will fill that gap. So basically what it is an electronic monitoring device. It measures the tension of the bird scaring line as it's being trawled through the water, and then that data is submitted through a pipeline and becomes part of the compliance monitoring system. So this is currently being implemented in 20 vessels this year, and it's hoped that by the end of the year we'll have fleet-wide implementation of this device to make sure that these vessels are using these bird scaring lines, as they're obviously very effective in mitigating this threat. And then the last big threat I'm going to talk about is resource competition. So I'm just going to talk about one species here, the African penguin, which is now critically endangered with a forecast extinction in 2035. So urgent action is needed to mitigate especially threats associated with the availability of their specialized prey, anchovy and sardine. One of the more proactive projects led by Christina Hagen is the establishment of a new African penguin colony at De Hoop Nature Reserve. And the aim here is to create safe breeding habitat in an area of relatively high sardine and anchovy abundance on the south coast, which is with very little fishing pressure. And this is hoped to alleviate those pressures especially. So in 2018, a predator-proof fence was installed around the periphery of this peninsula to prevent animals such as leopards and caracals predating on penguins. Lifelike cement decoys were installed on the rocks, and call playback was propagated out to the ocean to attract birds to the colony. And with the help of SANBI, we've released 333 hand-reared juveniles since 2021, roughly 80 to 100 a year. And since 2022, we've had 15 chicks that have been fledged at the colony. The largest number of nests we've had has been 4. So we're hoping this colony, as with Boulders and Stony Point, which took roughly 10 to 20 years to get to a sustainable population level. It's hoping this colony gets to those sort of numbers in the next 10 to 15 years. And then, sorry, just to finish off, the last slide is around important purseine fishery no-take zones around important African penguin colonies. So these 6 colonies collectively hold roughly 76% of the global population of African penguins. There's been a lot of work done on mitigating resource competition by the purseine fishery, going all the way back to the early 2000s with an island closure experiment, and then subsequent stakeholder engagements over many years with all the partners involved at the bottom. And just last year, after a court-ordered settlement, we've had improved closures around 3 of those 6, with the other 3 having also some of them decent, some not so decent closures, but at least good closures in the majority of these colonies. And these will be monitored and evaluated for the next 10 years to gauge the effectiveness of these closures in mitigating resource competition in the long term around these colonies. And just to finish off, none of this work would be possible in isolation. We rely heavily on collaboration with partners, and yeah, just want to acknowledge all the partners there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Alistair, and thanks to the audience for being so patient with us. Yeah, I have deep appreciation for all of the effort from everyone, all the speakers. You know, these organizations do this work, and it really helps nationally with species recovery and assessment. So I just want to thank everyone for their participation. We are unfortunately out of time for any verbal Q&A, but there's been quite a bit of interaction in the chat, which is great. If there are any other questions for Alistair, please do put them in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to set you free. I want to just, before we go, maybe invite all of our speakers. I know Jean had to leave, but all of our speakers to put on their cameras, and we can just give them a round of applause for their work and their efforts in species recovery. Not using my emojis. Thanks so much, everyone. And yeah, have a fantastic day. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Megan. Bye.